Hey there, this is Alexa. This is the Wishbeads podcast, and I am so excited because I have a new friend on the podcast with me today, Heather Chauvin, and she is lots of things, but she also has an incredible podcast called Mom is in Control. And I think I can relate to Heather on all kinds of things. So first of all, Heather, thank you for being on the podcast. I will be, in all honesty, the first time Heather and I are meeting is actually today, and we just wrapped up a recording for her podcast. But I can tell you one thing, we connect on lots of levels, lots and lots. Everything from loving crystals to when we were kids, to being entrepreneurs and moms and lovers of conversation and connection. And I so appreciate, Heather, the way you show up in honesty about your story, about your curiosity. And I so enjoyed our conversation. So thank you for joining me on my podcast.
I'm excited to have this conversation. It's always nice when you're not the one asking all the questions and you can just show up and answer the questions.
That is so
a beautiful
true.
thing. Yeah.
It's so true.
I love these conversations. And right now in my life, what is so apparent to me, I'm writing a book, is the power of storytelling, because it creates so much connection, and you meet somebody and you just hear stories. You're like, you're my people.
Yeah. And I also think that stories have such a powerful way of hearing other people's perspectives. And you realize that, well, first of all, everybody has a story, and a story worth telling, a story worth hearing. Yeah. And one of my favorite things is the Moth. And I will always spend some time on a Sunday.
The podcast.
The podcast, right? The Moth. Yeah. Not like moths out in the world, but yes, the Moth, the podcast, themoth.org, if you're not familiar. And Heather, honestly, one of the first things that I saw about you, because someone had connected us saying, like, you two should meet, you two should be talking, was your very powerful TEDx talk about your own health journey. Would you mind sharing, your story because I was blown away, actually. I was so moved. And that was sort of my entry into your world, was ironically through your story. Can you just share a bit about that to catch everybody up to speed who may not be familiar with you?
Yeah. So I actually often get asked about the TEDx talk. I think it was in 2018. So it was a few years ago. Mm-hmm. And people ask me what that experience was like. And to pull it's different than doing work in the world and then having to, pull your message out of you. And not only that, but put it in a specific format that meets somebody else's expectations. Like, if you're a minute over, if this happens. And it's kind of a representation for life. Like, how do you be yourself, express who you want to be in this sacred container of space and time, and get it through the punchline. Yeah. So, the TEDx talk is titled Dying to be a Good Mother, which is what the book is about. And man, I'm like, where do I start? But the whole, in a nutshell, dying to be a good mother. And the story is 6 years ago, I was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. Mother of 3 boys. They're now 15, 10, and 7. But I think cancer saved my life. Like, that is a crazy thing to say. But I learned, I was doing so much work up until that moment. When I say work, I mean personal development work. 10, how old was my son? He was 9 at the time, the oldest. So almost a decade before that was when I was like, okay, I need to become this person. But the one thing that I had not yet let go of, which is so deeply ingrained in us as women, is this, what does a good mother look like? And I subscribed to the beliefs because I was looking at the women around me, and I was invested in coaching. I had coaching. I had all these things, and I was a hustler. I just kept going and going and going and going and going. And I was getting rewarded for it, pat on the back, like, how do you do it all? How do you do it all?
Yeah.
And I was barely eating. And I've never been diagnosed with an eating disorder, but I I just didn't know how. I was terrified of food. If this apple had pesticides on it, are you going to die? And, are you going to it's so much fear around food, so much fear around creating any form of space for myself in the world. And my abdomen started to grow, and I thought, okay, I'm swollen. And my first thought was, oh, maybe I just have a gluten allergy. Okay. I'm going to self-diagnose. So now I'm going to start eating gluten-free. And it kept growing and growing and growing. And there's that saying of what you resist will persist and grow bigger. And it wasn't so much, I believe our bodies are constantly talking to us, whether it's that little pain in your shoulder, whether it's the headache that you have. It's a message. Your body is a vehicle. And I know, on our podcast or my podcast, we talked about meditation and listening and going within. And I wasn't listening to myself. I didn't listen to my wants, my needs, my desires. I just did what I thought I was supposed to do to be a good mom and to be good in the world, which was to work really hard. I get so triggered when I hear women say that, like, this is hard work. We can do hard things. And I'm like, no, we can do uncomfortable things temporarily. Like,
yes.
It's very uncomfortable to have uncomfortable conversations. It's not actually hard. It's not difficult. It's temporarily uncomfortable, but opening your mouth and speaking your truth is not difficult. It is uncomfortable because we've been conditioned not to do it. So I went into the emergency room with my husband the first time I left, because I told myself, I don't deserve to be here. I'm not sick enough. And yet I'm at home and I'm like, it's in the middle of winter and my windows are open and I'm sweating buckets. And my husband's like, we're going to the hospital tomorrow. We are not leaving until you get looked at. And Alexa, I went in, they did a CT on my abdomen, they did blood work, and on the spot said, Heather, you have cancer. Like, in the ER, you have cancer. And she looked at me and said, because of your age, your blood work, and we just don't know what kind it is. And the crazy part was, I knew. I had this knowing, and it was confirmation for me. And it was something that I was running away from for a very, very long time, because I was terrified and my primal brain just took over. And I remember walking out of the hospital that night, and that night it was raining, which was very unusual because it was December 21st, which was a few days before Christmas. So where we live, it's supposed to be snowing. And time just stopped. My husband goes ahead of me. I'm walking out. I look up to the sky and I'm like, and every time I do this, I like want to cry. And I'm like, you finally have my attention. Yeah. And I'm like, I will listen. I surrender. Show me the way. Show me the way. And I just stopped trying to be an ego maniac and control freak. And I said, show me, I'm listening.
Oh, Heather, it's so powerful. I mean, when you say, cancer saved my life, and that moment and the honesty of owning the uncomfortable journey that you went through. And I mean, there are so many things that I can relate to in your story. The pats on the back, the hard work. I'm going to show everybody how hard I'm working. Very resonant. And yet we were even discussing it in your podcast, this idea of, one, perfectionism, and two, also this idea of knowing. How do you know what your wish is? How do you know what you're avoiding? How do you know? Really teaching other people, which you do so beautifully in your work, to reconnect with their inner knowing, to have the uncomfortable conversations and to put things out there and get feedback. So powerful. And then to take it, I mean, even just to give you some acknowledgement here, but to take that experience, one, recover from cancer. So use all of the learning that you had done and then apply, whatever's personal development work that you have been doing, and then use that, I would imagine, and I want to hear about that actually. How did you translate the work that you had been doing? And I really do want to emphasize that it was effortful, this self-discovery, personal development, it was intention and action. How did you use those tools actively in your healing journey as well, in that moment of surrender?
So I feel like that moment of surrender was like the beginning of a marathon. And, all the training that you have to do at the beginning of before you start that race, the miles that you have to put in, the rest and recovery. I found meditation, 10 years prior to that. So jumping into this, my son, so I come from a social work background, and I really, in the social work world, was supporting families and seeing, this judgment projected onto children and this judgment projected onto parents. And I would always think to myself, these people are hypocrites. Like, these people are hypocrites, because I know how they go home and treat their own families and treat themselves. And yet they're judging these other families that maybe just have not had the privileges that they've had. And there's no education here. This is just pure discrimination and a system that is broken. And I had this inner knowing and desire to like want to teach and educate, but also from a selfish place, I would go home and I didn't understand my son's behavior. And he was this sensitive little soul and anxious. And, so he had big emotions, anger, anxiety. I was asking all of the professionals for help, like, the professionals that weren't really professionals, like, a doctor who can prescribe like antibiotics, but isn't going to be able to tell you about your child's psyche and psychology. Yeah. And then I would go to a therapist, and it was like, well, let's just dig into the past. And I'm like, I get this. I get all of this, but there's this knowing inside of me that's like, there's more, there's something different. And so that was when I found meditation. And of course, at first, being the control freak that I was, and still am recovering from, I decided to start teaching meditation to my son, which he was projecting back to me, teaching it back to myself. So I was doing all of this work, but I was not. Okay, are you ready? Ready for the big grand finale?
I am.
I wasn't actually giving myself permission to become the person who I wanted to be. I was just standing on the sidelines of, wouldn't it be nice to like make a lot of money one day? Oh, but that's selfish. I could never do that. Like, you have to be a good mom. Like, you have to be with your kids 24 hours a day. Oh, wouldn't it be nice to just, travel around the world? But you can't do that, because then who are people going to think you are? Like, you're, and so this dimming of my light, this dimming of my soul, and it just kept going down and down and down and down and down. And then, so getting sick, I had to figure out how to feel alive again. I had to figure out rather quickly. And that what they call monkey mind, or the fear of judgment, the fear of whatever, I actually didn't care about, because I was now in survival mode of like the fear of not dying.
Yeah.
It was, So I took action. Which they don't talk about in the law of attraction at all. They're just like, meditate, visualize, it will come to you. Just cross your fingers, you're good to go. As long as you raise your vibes, you'll attract.
Yeah.
But you got to do the hard work too. You got to take
absolutely. I mean,
and that's, you have to do the uncomfortable work, not the
uncomfortable work. I like that clarification, and I haven't heard that before, and I love that. I will attribute that to you. That is actually why I created the Wishwork, wrote a book called Wishwork, because when I saw the movie The Secret, and I really had always been a student of, mystical things, because I've always been curious about it, and I found not just curiosity, but some guidance as well. But when I saw that movie in particular, I was like, I think that moment sitting in a lazy boy chair, that doesn't work for me. That's not my experience. And that's not what I would tell people just to do. I think there's plenty of power in visioning. And I think there's power in creating a vision board and even having intentional jewelry. But the rubber meets the road. The way things happen is because you take work. And boy, when you're faced with a life and death situation, such as your diagnosis, I can see where the motivation in action, like it's right there. It's right there. And in those moments, what were your tools, like really getting into the micro? Because the wish work is really about the tiny micro shifts that you take daily. So you get out of the comfortable world of concepts and self-help books. You get out of the comfortable sort of sidelines, bystander witnessing of concepts, and you're really in the flow and the action of it. What are those, like, what are 2 or 3 things that you absolutely did and took action on that was a direct part of your healing process?
So the first thing that I did, so I was a lover of Danielle Laporte's work right before, and that's kind of when the desire map came out.
Sure.
And so, the main concept of that is, how do you want to feel, right? Like, it's not the new house that you want. It's you're craving more space. So you're craving that feeling of space, right? So I implemented this right away. So in that moment, there I am in my hospital bed, or I'm at home recovering because I went through aggressive treatment. I'd be in the hospital for 2 or 3 weeks at a time. I wouldn't see my family. I would come home for 4 days and then go back. And so when I was home, I'm like, okay, how do I want to feel? I want to feel alive. I want to feel connected. Okay, great. How are you supposed to be able to do that while you're lying in bed, no energy, and you're very close to death, or your body is like dying physically to let go so that it can come back, more alive? And what does connection mean? So instead of going into victim mode of poor me, poor me, poor me, I started asking myself, how can I? How can I? How can I? And I stayed curious. So specific, tangible things that I did, when you're in that space, like, I became heightenedly aware of all the energies around me. And, if you're like, what does that mean? We all know what it feels like when an asshole walks into the room, right? Like, what it feels like. If you have a partner, if you have a child, what it feels like when a tantrum is coming on. We know what energy feels like. So if I wanted to feel alive, what's the opposite of that? Like death, right?
Right.
So first thing I did, every person that treated me like I was dying, I immediately cut off the conversation and I'm like, bye. I do not need you right now in my little bubble. So if you're calling me, if you're texting, I'm sending, just that energy. I was like, I don't need this right now. I need somebody who can hold me. I need somebody who's like, I got you. And even if they are scared and terrified and worried, and they're like, I don't think she's going to make it, they're not projecting that on me. They are holding their own energy, and they're like, I'm going to tuck this away for an hour while I go visit, because I'm going to show up for her, and then I'm going to take it out of the closet and I'm going to process my own emotion. So I just started cutting those people off. That was one of the first things that I did.
Wow. Yes. I like it. And when you were talking, again, I mentioned this in our previous recording, that Eckhart Tolle talks about the power of now. I mean, if anyone hasn't read that book, please read the book again or do it for the first time. But this idea of this heightened awareness and feeling the energy, this is really powerful stuff. And I often turn to nature to kind of get my drink of energy and grace and the people around me. But I also love this idea, especially in this heightened time when we're talking about really uncomfortable conversations around race. It's about showing up in your grace, but processing whatever uncomfortable feelings, but not projecting those uncomfortable conversations and polluting the air with more, kind of.
It's not about you.
It's not about you. It's not about you.
No, it's not about you. And if you're showing up for somebody else, and this isn't even the race conversation. It's like it's emotional intelligence 101.
Yes.
It's not about you. If your child is having a tantrum and you're like, oh my gosh, you're inconveniencing my day. It's not about you. That child is experiencing something right now. So you have to be adult enough to have the emotional intelligence skills to put your shit away just for a moment so that you can be present for your child and go, wow, you're really angry right now. Okay, let me help you process this. And then when I'm not doing that, I'm doing my own work.
Yeah.
And that was really, having that background was really what I think the forefront of my healing when I was diagnosed.
Wow, it's so powerful. It's such an incredible reminder. And if you can do that, I mean, I guess your life is on the line. So that's not something that is just convenient and thoughtful. It was necessary. It was a necessary requirement to your healing. And what energy you put in your sphere, that's beautiful. That's really beautiful.
You have to make a decision, am I going to choose to live? And I don't make that statement lightly, because I've had friends who have passed, since then. And that's why I also, I don't want to say struggle. That's why I actually have a hard time when people say cancer survivor, because I don't think this is like a race that you win. I do believe there's something bigger at play, and, I'm going to show up, but it doesn't mean I failed or someone else failed. I actually, one of my good friends, she fought like heck and she lived her fullest. And she's like, this is, it is what it is. But this woman just fully showed up. And when it was go time, man, she inspired every single person around her. And it really just goes to show, like, stripping illness away, whether you've had a moment in your life like that or not, I see a lot of women that I work with now who say, but Heather, I don't have a story like you. Like, I didn't have cancer. Something bad didn't happen to me. And I'm like, why? Why are we waiting for something bad to happen in order to learn how to live? Yeah. And in order to learn how to feel alive? And there's a moment that I had on the bathroom floor where I don't know when it was. I think I was home in between treatments, and I was so terrified of dying, like just paralyzed in fear. And so I'm on the bathroom floor, and of course I'm choking down all my tears because I don't want to inconvenience my family with my discomfort, right? Because I got to be good. Oh my God, the bullshit we tell ourselves. So I got to be good. So I'm holding it in, and I don't want to wake up anybody. I have this feeling. So this was almost like a meditative state I got into, not on purpose. And I'm like, I'm going to die. 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 And I'm crying. I'm crying. I'm crying. And then there was this little voice, this knowing that said, Heather, this is not the fear of death that's coming up for you. You do not know how to get out of this. You do not know how to feel alive. Never in your life have you been able to feel the full capacity of joy and feeling alive. And that is your work, and that is what you were supposed to do. And so after that moment, which, we talked about on my podcast of like listening and listening and listening, when I heard that, something just sparked inside of me. And then again, that word, okay, alive, what do you need to do? What do you need to do? And I just kept focusing on that. How do I want to feel? And experimenting, absolutely experimenting. And
I love that word.
Yeah. There was something that happened where I had to learn how to feel again. I had no idea what happy people did. Like previous to this, I had no idea what happy people did. I'm like, okay, there's people walking. Why would anybody just walk for fun? I do not understand why anyone would just go outside and walk for fun. Like, such a waste of time. I could be getting laundry done. I could do this. I could get through my emails. Why would anybody do that? Why would anybody journal? Why would anybody put pen to paper? This is the dumbest invention ever. These people are weird. I do not understand them. And I just started doing these things that I was judging because I knew there was something there in my judgment.
I'm really having a moment because, again, like there's so many things that I want to respond to and I want to take in and just honor. But I love this idea of just acknowledging there is growth. There is growth. There is room for growth. There is room for growth. And just sort of taking the personal responsibility. And again, your situation demanded it. And I don't believe that you need to have a life and death situation in order to invite that deeper seeking and that deeper questioning and curiosity. Because that opportunity to say, what is it? What is it that is making somebody happy? That what are people doing that is putting them in a state that feels that I'm gravitating towards or that I'm just curious about? And it takes effort, I think, to make time to even to ask the questions, because it's so easy. We're also addicted to being so busy, especially as, I know you're Canadian, but even in America, in the sort of like modern work world, that even when I would, my husband's family is Italian American, so we would go to Italy, and it would take me a while to dial back the engine, because Mama's engine is like, it's the same. Like I was really resonating with that with you, that like getting things done and getting things done and getting things done, and not building in space. Now if you own your own business, and I have 2 businesses, then making space actually requires a lot of intention, because the default is, well, there's just a little bit more. And if I just attend to this, then I can relax. And if I just answer this, then I can relax. If I just produce this, launch this, make this, then I can relax. And I've watched other people who I know are very busy. They just shut things down. They take the day off. They take vacation time. They do all that. And it's very interesting to have that lens of self-reflection with the intention of refinement, with the intention of growth. Because I could imagine that here you are, fast forward from that moment in the ER where you realize the gravity of the situation. I feel like, and I'm going to ask you, aren't you still asking? Are you still asking the same questions of yourself? Are you still you're still seeking? Are you still refining?
I mean, now.
Yeah. Now.
Oh, yeah. But now it comes from a healthier place.
Yeah.
So back then I was running away from something.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm running towards something. So, and now it's this, how good can it get is kind of my mantra. Yeah. So when I remember post-treatment, the doctor said, you're fine, you're recovered, quote unquote, recovered, you're in remission. And I was terrified because I'm like, well, what's my next step? She's like, you're good, just go. I'm like, well, I feel like I've been in prison and you just like said, go back out into the regular world. And there was this very vulnerable time. And so I started doing integrative medicine. And for whatever reason, that world made me feel like there was hope, because there was this conversation around possibility and it wasn't doom and gloom. And it was like, like look at an alternative perspective. And I remember starting that process, and then, you go down these holes of like the mind body connection. And I'm like, oh, wow. So there's other ways that this could be. Right. And so now when I look at something, there is no end game, which I think modern society has, of like, okay, you make X amount of money, you can stop now. Like you don't have to try anymore. Yeah. But I do believe in, we're constantly evolving. And, if you stay in the state of curiosity, you're always a student and you're always learning, and your children are always growing. And then there's a new development phase that you need to learn about, and, all other stuff coming up. So yeah, for me, I still have fear. I still have guilt. I still have all the feelings that I had previous, but they're not as intense. And when they are, I know how to manage them a little bit better. And I can, I still have resistance. My body still tells me things, and I can be triggered and go, oh, what is that? But I know how to shift it a lot quicker and get out of that. But I feel like you're just, I don't want to say it's this game. You're just constantly like, what's next? What's next? What's next? Yeah. Before, I used to come from this panic place of like, I need to get it all done. Right. Like that go. Yeah. And now I can get in that space rather quickly if I'm like getting into a state of momentum, but I know how to manage my energy a lot better. And There's something that I teach inside my coaching programs, which is called energetic time management, which is this process of learning, like, how do you want to feel? And then like the strategic steps that you need to take to put that on the calendar, and then to follow through. And it's like an unlearning, it's a process, right? People do it once. They're like, my life isn't changed. What's going on? I'm like, yes, it's called practice. You have to practice.
Consistency.
But it's the same process. Like, I use the same tool that I made because I needed it. And I've been using it for 6 years and it's still changed. It's still changing. Yep. And you're never going to stop. It just gets better and better and better. But because I've done this, one thing that I found challenging was, there is this, and this is kind of where I take a stand in motherhood, because I'm a huge advocate for mothering and motherhood and parenting. And I truly believe we can feel good while we're parenting. Like, I don't care if you just gave birth today or you adopted a child today, like, if whatever this is, it doesn't matter where you are, you can feel good. Yes, there are moments and seasons of discomfort, but you can still experience joy and grief at the same time. Like, that has just been my personal experience. Yeah. And even though that our hearts are very heavy right now, I can still, after this conversation, go out and take action that is in alignment with joy. Yes. And I may not be able to fully experience it today, but if I'm putting energy towards that, like, I'm allowed to be both. Right. And I shifted my mindset that actually the more I became that person, the more I can give. Like, I can hold that space for somebody who is experiencing the grief, or the feedback that I might get from a post that is not appropriate or something like this. I have the emotional resiliency to take that on, or, the financial abundance. It's like, you're able to donate, you're able to give back. You can create the time and space through COVID to rest and to go, oh my gosh, this pandemic, I don't know what to do. I can't handle this. Okay. Just crawl into a hole if you need to for a little bit, and then come back out when you're ready. So it's a very different concept, but I have personally felt like I've left the modern conversation around motherhood, which is martyrdom. I can't say the word.
Martyrdom. I know which one.
Martyrdom. Did I say it?
Martyrdom. Yeah, you did. I know what you're talking about.
Being a martyr. I can say that. And this culture of like, oh, I had to drink a bottle of wine today to get through. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And all of that. So I'm just leaving that conversation because I no longer feel in alignment with it. And that's really what I'm putting out into the world for women, is there is another way.
Oh my gosh. And that's why I so resonate with you. I so resonate with your work. I so appreciate the conversation and the courage to really have that conversation and stand in that. I too, and we know this, you actually started by like, when like a jerk walks in the room, you feel that energy. The same way that when mama is happy, I can bring lightness and fun and a little dancing while we're doing the dishes, or there is this feeling of calm and love. That's when I shine, and that energy touches my family. And I can so easily get to a place where I'm like, blah, there's just too much because modern life is there's a lot of things going on, and we have these possibilities that are presented to us, which open, I was raised by a working mom who instilled, as my father did as well, like, you can do anything you want. The freedom of that is exciting. So what happened was I tried to do everything I ever wanted all at once. And I quickly could get very burnt out, or feeling overwhelmed, or feeling like it's not enough, or I'm never enough. And this idea of nurturing the soul, nurturing and self-care and love, it is an equal, very necessary fuel to have the bandwidth to have the introspection, the self-care, the self-love, the self-work. And it's okay to say to your kids along the way, like, I'm not perfect. Like, it's okay. It's all of it is a deep part of the honest conversation that we can have with ourselves and our families. And it makes the journey so much more rich. That's my experience. And when we have those moments when we stumble, we can pick ourselves back up and And there isn't, like, as you were
Again,
talking about, like there's no end to this. Maybe there's a spiral going upwards, right? But we're going to find ourselves in the same kind of familiar environment and say, okay, what can I do to put myself back to where I'm feeling more in flow, in grace? And I love the fact that you're a lifelong learner. And I love the fact that you are having these conversations around business and parenthood and of being a woman, and guiding others along the way. It's fantastic. And I know that this is really, Heather, now that we've now chatted with each other for a couple hours, which is so cool. This is also your own Wishbeads experience, because somehow the Wishbeads haven't made it to you, which means that I'm excited to have a second part to this podcast at some point, so I can hear about your experience.
Yeah, I'm excited too. I want to dive in. I think it's, man, it's so magical what happens when you shift and how your world shifts.
Yeah. And these shifts can be small. They can start very, very small. These little moments, and I can see how intentionally you live your life. So
I have like a child right here. He's like trying to stay out of the
Oh, I know, our Zoom worlds. Hi. Oh my goodness. Hello.
He's probably trying to look for something. Anyways, he'll be
Yeah,
the quiet
it
one.
is all good. And I think that's actually one of the beautiful aspects of everybody being at home, Zooming and all of it. It's like, it's all good. Like, I'm surprised that someone hasn't tried to walk through this door. There's like a little sign that's on the door right over here that's like, shh, mama's working. Like, literally, that's what the sign says.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, we're so beautifully human. We're beautifully human, and it's all okay. It's all okay.
Yeah.
Heather, how can people connect with you, your work, your story? Would you mind just sharing the best way for people to learn more about you?
Yeah, so I hang out a lot on the podcast. So it's called Mom is in Control. You can find it anywhere you listen to podcasts. I'm on Instagram at Heather Chauvin _. And that's it. Those are my two main places. You can go to my name, Heather Chauvin, CHAUVIN.com.
Awesome. And I'm going to have links to all of Heather's wonderful places where she is, so you can connect, be in touch, learn from her, follow her, all of those good things. I am so delighted, Heather, to know you, to be in your orbit. And I'm excited for more exciting conversations in the future as well. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
This has been amazing. Thank you, Alexa.